Welcome to the Especially for Athletes podcast, where we explore essential principles that empower athletes to learn life's most valuable lessons through sports.
We are so happy to be joined by Dr. Sheldon Martin, who has appeared on many of our podcasts as a guest host today. Sheldon, welcome. We're so appreciative of you taking time to be with us today and lend your expertise and thoughts and mingle two of your worlds, sports, which was a huge part of your life growing up, huge part of your kid's life now, and of course, the Doctor of Behavioral Health and your expertise there to give us some tips on one of our core principles is win the hour. And we're going to talk today about how having a plan, can impact our wellness. It could even lower anxiety, and it can help us feel more solid, I guess, more mainstream. But you kind of have some cautions on both sides of that sometimes having a plan is a wonderful thing to do. And maybe let me set this up just a little bit more. So we challenge our athletes to go 16-0. Meaning 8 hours of sleep and rest. And then, each hour of each day, they look at that hour and they ask themselves, what can I do to win that hour? So if I'm in a math class, what do I need to do to win at math? And, it's stuff like sit in the front, raise your hand, ask questions, don't move on without really understanding it, stay after class. You know what I'm saying? Like that's win the hour there. And so, but part of that is planning, like actually looking at your day and making sure you're taking your discretionary time when someone's not telling you what to do and steering it toward goals that really matter to you. And so we feel that's very beneficial to plan like that. Maybe if you could start out, what are the benefits of planning? And then as you hear that 16-0, kind of what are some things that you're like, that's true, that's good, but here's some other things that you might want to be cautioned to make sure it doesn't go too far the other way. Does that question make sense?
Yeah, it sure does. In fact, it leads to an analogy that I like to use often in my practice and just when I teach. And that's if you can imagine a bowling lane. And a bowling lane has gutters on each side. And so if planning is this bowling lane, there's going to be a gutter to the left and a gutter to the right. So one caution that we see often is one you've alluded to, and that is a lack of planning is a problem. So not making any effort to plan for the day, to be prepared to win that hour is a problem. You're always going to be in survival mode and crisis mode, and we can talk about why that's not a good thing. However, a lot of times on the other gutter, on the other side of the lane, is that we plan to the extent, or our preparation and planning has to be so perfect that it leads to what we call functional freezing, right? So if someone is planning for conditioning or strength training, everything, they spend so much time planning and it becomes so overwhelming that they actually never get started because all of the energy goes into planning and they freeze. And so both of those are gutters. And there's a way to learn how to kind of stay in the lane, that we're planning enough to be successful and not over planning to the extent that we're freezing and not taking some initial steps.
Sweet. So what would you say in your mind, what would healthy planning look like? Like if we were to take a young person and help them see, like you shared the analogy of weightlifting. So let's just stick there for a second. A young person wants to get stronger, right? So functional freeze is they're on Instagram all the time, reading all the things you should do, all the things you shouldn't do. They're studying what everyone's lifting plans are, what their regiment is, and they get this functional freeze because people don't agree with one another, and therefore they feel like they can't move forward until they've figured out what the perfect plan is. That would be too far here. Maybe the other side is just not even researching at all, not even knowing anything, just walking into a gym and, like Brian Regan said, all of a sudden you're in the scaffolding, you're trying to lift the scaffolding, and they're like, "Hey, well, that's just set up to paint. That's not even a machine." So what's the happy medium, and how can people be a healthy planner?
Yeah, so if you take weightlifting, and you could even boil it down to like the actual day. So if it was too far one side, it could even be, oh man, it's Wednesday, and I want to do a full week of routine, so I'll start next Monday. Oh, I really don't want to lift without protein or creatine, and so I need to go and get that, and oh man, I had my favorite pair of gym shorts. They're not okay. So that would, even in the moment, lead to then not lifting. And then the other end of that would be such a lack of planning that I show up to the gym and I just bench every day. And so that lack of planning actually leads to I'm not getting stronger. So an effective planner would be one to say, I know enough to get started. It's a Wednesday and I missed Monday and Tuesday. That's okay. I'm going to start. I'm just going to put on my gym shorts and a shirt. I'm going to get to the gym, right? And I'm going to get there. If I'm new to this, I'm going to plan by asking someone. I'll ask someone a question. I'll be willing to kind of put myself out there. Or if I don't have the perfect routine worked out, I'm going to get started and just say, you know what, I'm going to do upper body today. And I know a principle is not to do the same area of the body too much in a row. So I'm going to do upper body today, lower body tomorrow, and I'm going to figure out a better plan. So you see that middle lane there is I'm getting there, which is good. I have some idea of how to get started. And I'm going to be willing to ask for help on how to keep moving down that lane. That would be a good planner. And then as they gain new knowledge, as they get into a better routine, that planning is going to tighten up, right? And now on Mondays, they're going to do a specific thing, and Tuesdays, and their plan can keep getting better as they keep moving and leaning into it.
Yeah, I love that. So what keeps some people from getting started is the feeling that they need a perfect plan. And so as they lay out those 16 hours, it's okay to say, okay, here's my general plan for these things. It's okay to realize that plan really didn't work, or I need to learn more about that. I need to ask people about that. But don't get frozen by needing the perfect plan in order to get started. Just get started and things will take care of themselves.
That's
awesome.
Right.
Awesome. And you were talking too in a conversation that we had that there's almost these different phases of planning that would enrich our principle of win the hour a little bit. You gave kind of 3 tips, and I would love if you would just take a minute and give these 3 tips on the podcast today. So the first one is, as you come up with a plan, which is an important part of winning the hour, you should plan for what you can control. So speak to that for a second.
So any situation, if I'm planning to win the hour, whatever hour I select, there are going to be things about that hour that are going to be very predictable. You started the podcast by mentioning math class, right? There's certain things, I can't predict everything, but there are certain things that I know about math class. And if I know them, there's very few things we actually can control, but the more I know about the predictability of that thing that's going to happen in the hour, plan ahead for that moment. And so, math class, you mentioned, okay, I know that that teacher doesn't have a seating chart. I can sit up front. I can raise my hand. I can, there are certain things I know about this situation that I can plan for. When it comes to sports, it's also the same thing. Because there are so many things that are unpredictable, there are certain elements that we could look at and say, this is going to happen. I mean, this is something that I can control. I think this is why, Shad, you see a lot of great athletes have a very specific pregame routine. There's an element that, I remember hearing Kobe Bryant talk a lot about this. He wanted to arrive at the arena at a certain time. He then had a flow that went through that he wanted to do every single time. He could control it, so his plan was more predictable because once the game starts, there were a lot of variables you can't control. So that first moment is if you can predict things that are going to happen in that hour, plan for them, be prepared for them, because in that hour, there's going to be a lot of other unpredictable situations that come up.
Awesome. The second tip you gave, you called micro planning for potential situations. What does micro planning look like?
Yeah, so micro planning is you take these moments that if we separate it from like pregame preparation, like in that hour, there's going to be something that that does occur, and I can now practice micro plan. I can practice being great at that thing. So I use the analogy, every basketball team is going to have an inbounds play, right? I mean, there's going to be a moment in the game when you're going to have an inbounds play that you're going to run. So that would be an element of micro planning to say, hey, at this moment, here's what we're going to do, and we're going to practice it. We're going to practice it. We don't know the exact moment when this situation is going to come up. And in a very rare circumstance, maybe it's if it's a play with a few seconds left, maybe that situation doesn't come up. But the likelihood of a team being in a situation when you've got 5 seconds on the clock and you need to score a basket to win the game, you've got the ball and you're taking it out, that would be micro planning. Let's predict some of these moments that are going to happen, and we're going to practice them over and over and over, because what happens is when chaos happens, we all go into survival mode. Every single one of us. That's just how we respond. So the more that we plan for potential situations, the better we feel and the more relaxed we are and prepared to be able to adjust to those situations in the moment. Because we're not just surviving, we're actually planning to thrive in those moments.
Awesome. So that's a great team kind of application of micro planning. I'm wondering what it would look like. What are some micro planning situations an individual athlete can take? You know what I'm saying? Like, So let's take a basketball player. Right now we're in basketball season, and so teams, they drill these out of bounds plays or press breaks or whatever it might be, so that when a team all of a sudden, boom, rushes upon you and they put on a press, you know exactly what you're doing. We go into press break, you yell it out, you practice it 1,000 times. What does that look like for an individual athlete to do micro planning for potential situations? Does anything come to mind there?
Yeah, I think this is where you see those individual practice moments really thrive. So if we stick with basketball, you're going to have to dribble. I mean, I know it sounds so funny, but there's kind of an ongoing joke, right, at times of how rare it is for a junior high or even kind of an intro basketball player in high school to be able to dribble with their offhand, with their left hand. You know that's going to happen. You know at some point you're going to need that skill. So plan for it. Prepare for it, right? Get prepared to use that skill. I don't need anyone else around me. It's not a play. Here's a skill that I'm going to need. The same comes for your athletes in other moments that they're going to have with school or in life, where they might not know the exact moment they need to dribble with their offhand. They just know they're going to need to do that.
Yeah.
So it might be something as simple as, man, I know I'm going to have to create a PowerPoint for my my English class or something. I don't know how to do that. Like, I'm going to prepare and learn how to do that because at some point in the semester, my teacher is going to ask me to do this task. And so I'm going to practice it on my own.
Awesome. Yeah, I love that left-handed dribbling analogy because it's, that's a great example of micro planning. Because you could just put, okay, I have 16 hours and that discretionary time. I mean, that's something we've really been emphasizing this year as we go around, that really people who achieve great things, they seem to be able to take their discretionary time and steer it toward their goals. But sometimes the goal is like, I want to play college basketball, right? And it's like, yeah, that's not, I mean, that's on the macro level, that's a big thing. But saying, okay, so I know I'm going to have to handle the ball with my left hand really well if I'm going to get to the level of play I want to. Therefore, I'm going to take this hour a day. For at least a half an hour of that hour, I'm going to do these dribbling drills and I'm going to work on full speed dribbling with my left hand or whatever it might be, the reverse dribbles and the things that you're doing to create space. And I'm going to do these things for a half an hour a day. I'm going to dribble and I'm going to work on these specific aspects of my game that I want to improve to get to the level I want to. Am I catching the vision of what you mean by micro training?
Yep, you're exactly right. And to add to that, Shad, we have learned from studies what's really fascinating. Even if I'm alone, even if there are not people around me, my default is to still practice something I'm already pretty good at, as opposed to improving something I know I need help with. So whether it's dribbling with my left hand, right? If I know that I need to do that and I'm left alone in a gym and I don't intentionally do it, but I'm a pretty good shooter, I'm going to end up shooting more. Because we default, right? If I'm in the gym and there's a certain lift that I'm really strong at and another one that I know I need to improve, but my form's a little bit off and a little awkward, I'm going to default to what I'm really strong at. So this idea of knowing this, the micro planning, is actually addressing the needs that, if we're real honest with ourselves, we know they exist and they're not going to go away magically, right? Like, I need to practice and get better at this very specific skill.
Awesome. So we take tool 1 and tool 2. So plan what's within your control. Don't get frozen by needing the perfect plan. So what this might look like to a young athlete, if I'm hearing you correctly, is, okay, I want to get better at dribbling with my left hand. So I'm going to do a little bit of study. I'm going to Google now. We didn't have that back in our day, right? But I'm just going to Google now, getting better at dribbling with my offhand, drills to help me get better at dribbling with my offhand. And then I'm going to find 4 or 5 drills and I'm going to do those drills. I don't need the perfect drills. I don't need to get frozen by watching 17 different ones. I just need 5 really good drills. I'm going to do that for a half an hour every single day. And that will help me to develop in the way that I want to. And then as I do it, I might feel like this drill doesn't feel like it's helping me very much. I'm going to adjust that little plan that I have. But that seems to be combining 1 and 2.
Yep,
and then 3. Right. Okay, awesome. And then 3, you said reflecting and planning for future growth. That's a tool that you need if you're going to be an effective planner in a way that reduces anxiety and stress rather than adds to it. Can you talk just a little bit about what that looks like to reflect and plan for the future?
Yeah, maybe a phrase that I like is the best adjusters are the best winners, right? Because we can't predict, because there's a lot of variables in that, someone that can catch early and reflect and look back and adjust quickly, that's a winning formula. So you talk about winning the hour. Well, you know what? What if there's an hour or two I'm not winning? And you know what? I've missed a week. Okay, the best thing to do is to adjust in that moment and to move forward. Or to be real honest with ourselves, I want to get better at dribbling with my offhand. I'm doing a little bit of practice. I look back, realize, you know what? Yeah, I spent 20 minutes doing it. I really wasn't intently focused on those 20 minutes and doing drills. I could I could get better at this. Those who reflect and adjust quickly are going to be the best athletes and really the best at anything that they do in life. You have heard this said many times, but some of the great football coaches, right? Some of the greats of all time are those that head in at halftime and they adjust from what they just saw, and they come out in the second half with an adjusted game plan to win the game. That's one of the skills that makes them so great, right? We could do the same thing with win the hour. Adjust within the day if needed, and over a couple of days, look back. How do I need to adjust my planning so that I can capitalize on these hours and win the hour in a more effective way?
Awesome. In fact, I know someone who says a really, really important part of planning, they call it their vision hour. They kind of look at where they want to get, and then they analyze their goals. Are my goals really helping me get to where I want to? And they actually plan an hour of every week, and this is in their occupation, to do nothing, to put their phone down, to put everything away. They get a blank piece of paper. They think about where they're trying to get, and they just reflect on the last week and whether or not it's getting them to where they want. And then they refine and adjust those plans that they have made, which goes beautifully with what you're talking about in number one, right? So it's like, if you want to win the hour, don't worry about a perfect plan. Just get started. And then number two, micro plan, like say, okay, I want to be able to move the ball up the court a little bit better. I need to be better at dribbling with my left hand. So I'm going to come up with a plan to do that specific thing. If your plan is to get better at basketball, then you might gravitate toward those things that you're already doing really, really well. But then this third tip is reflecting and planning for future growth, and having an hour set aside where you could both reflect on the past week. Okay, is this really helping me? Do I feel like this is making a difference? And then look forward to the future week and plan and adjust those plans. Then it just has this feeling when you think of those three tools you gave us, it just has this feeling of forward movement, that you don't have to be perfect. You just have to be moving forward, right?
Yep, that's exactly right. It's a cycle, because if I'm living the concept of I can adjust quickly, well, then I can start quickly, right? If I'm not living that I can adjust quickly, then I have to put more emphasis on having the perfect plan before I start. And so they kind of feed each other. If I get started, that's the best thing I can do, and I start micro planning and really looking at this, well, the good news is I can adjust along the way, because I'm not going to get it just right. And so they do start to feed each other and build momentum as we kind of use all of them together.
And then just one last question here. How does that reduce stress when it comes to planning?
The reason it reduces stress is because anytime stress is always associated with fear. It's always associated with fear, even on a very small or kind of micro level, but it's still rooted in fear. And fear is the unknown. Fear is the, I don't know what's in the closet. It's the monster in the closet, right? That's where fear comes from. And so by exposing it, by planning for it, we reduce fear. We start to feel a higher level of confidence and competence. So the way that we start to build confidence is we build our competence in some of these areas that we are leaning to. We give ourselves a break when it doesn't have to be perfect. And so as both of those come together, the anxiety goes down because we're planning better, we're adjusting better, and we're allowing ourselves to grow. And that growth mindset is what reduces anxiety.
And then planning, when it produces anxiety, is when we get so stressed about having to have the perfect plan, or not giving ourselves a little grace. Like, I planned on lifting tonight, and then just something came up with my family or something I didn't expect. I didn't get to hit the gym. My plan didn't go perfect. So it's almost like you both in your plan and in your behavior, you need to give yourself a little grace, or the planning actually becomes more stressful.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Sheldon. Here's the 3 takeaways. Plan what you can control. Plan enough to be prepared, but not so much that you get paralyzed. Micro plan and practice for potential outcomes. Reacting is surviving, planning is thriving. And then third, reflecting on your past plan and planning for the future. When preparation meets opportunity, you're ready to win the hour. And so taking that hour each week, build it in to reflect about how it's going and plan and adjust for the future will really help. And that's part of winning the hour, is that planning. And so we just wanted to dive into that. Thank you, Sheldon, so much.
You're very welcome. Thank you again for having me.
Yeah, well, thank you. And thanks, everyone, for joining the Especially for Athletes podcast. Eyes up, do the work, win the hour.
Thank you for joining the Especially for Athletes podcast. To learn more about Especially for Athletes organization, get a copy of our book, The Sportlight, or to bring our program to your team, school, business, or organization, visit us at especiallyforathletes.org.